In a recent interview leading up to the release of Mortal Kombat 11, series co-creator Ed Boon told Game Informer that Mortal Kombat, at its core, is only popular because of the over-the-top violence. If you stripped away the blood and the gore, nobody would want to play it. And while the series is certainly centered around and most known for its outlandish violence, its initial incarnation, 1992's Mortal Kombat, offered more than just the hook of its mature content. Sure, that's what gets talked about the most. The congressional hearings, the outrage from parents, all that. But there was something underlying that made Mortal Kombat all the more enticing beyond the forbidden fruit of watching someone blow a kiss and burst their opponent into flames. What really made the game so alluring for so many of us was just how mysterious Mortal Kombat was. And it's that mystery that drove countless arcade goers to obsess over the game after the shock of its violence had worn off. The mystery is why we love Mortal Kombat. In the early 90s, any shopping mall, movie theater, or skating rink worth its salt had an arcade in it. Dimly lit rooms with dark walls filled by loud and colorful game machines, the sights and sounds created sensory overload. It was such a rush just to walk in the door. There were so many possibilities, so many options, but in 1992, if you stepped foot in an arcade, you were looking for something specific. You were looking for Mortal Kombat. Not even to play it really, because chances are you would have to wait in line if you were going to get a chance. Winner stays, loser pays. No, you sought the game out just to see it. Just to see what everyone was talking about, because people were talking about Mortal Kombat. In lunchrooms and playgrounds across the country, if you listened hard enough, you'd hear stories of an ultra-realistic fighting game where you could rip your opponent's head off, or tear out their still-beating heart. Stories always told in quiet, like it was so beyond any level of debauchery ever before seen that it could only be spoken about in whispers. Some had seen it, some just claimed to have seen it, but the mixture of lies and truth only added to the mysterious aura of this game. Remember, there were no television ads for arcade games, there was no YouTube. You had either experienced it or you hadn't. Mortal Kombat and its ultra-violence took on an almost urban legend status, stories kids told each other to shock and amaze. The reality though, at least when you finally got to the local arcade and you saw the game for the very first time, was probably a bit underwhelming. How could it not be after all that buildup and all that talk of it being the most violent piece of media ever created? No, chances are what you were met with initially was a fighting game that seemed to play a bit like Street Fighter 2, but used these really cool digitized human sprites and a cheesy martial arts movie as a backdrop. Sure, there were the occasional spurts of blood after an attack, but where were the decapitations? Why was everyone's heart still positioned comfortably in their chest? Each match ended with a brief period where the winner was prompted to finish their opponent, but chances are on your first viewing, anyone who was playing simply punched or kicked their wobbly foe, who then promptly fell over. Not exactly the ultra-violence you had heard so much about, but it is in that moment of disappointment that the true genius of Mortal Kombat shows itself. The entire game is built upon mystery. Nothing is explained. The story is vaguely told through character bio panels that play during the attract mode, assuming you ever even saw the attract mode, since there were probably lines of kids waiting to play the game. There was no move list. There was no indication that each character had their own finishing move, known as a fatality, that could be performed by executing a specific series of movements and button presses at a specific range from the opponent. Sure, there was a note on the machine itself that said use a combination of the joystick and buttons to do secret moves, but that's hardly a tutorial. So how in the world did anyone figure out that you could do these ultra-violent finishing moves that caused this big stir? They figured it out because Midway left breadcrumbs in the form of its most ingenious idea: the pit. The pit is in many ways the heart of Mortal Kombat. It represents everything that makes Mortal Kombat so great, and it is the embodiment of its mystery. The pit is one of 6 arenas in the game, and if you were to play even just a few matches, or watch a few matches leaning against the wall waiting for your turn, there's a high likelihood you would encounter it. What makes the pit unique, besides the aesthetic of a narrow platform that appears to be raised high above the ground, is that there is a fatality specific to the stage that can be performed by anyone, using any character, and even by accident. The uppercut is the strongest attack in the game, and it's likely something even the most novice player would figure out how to do just by button mashing. So when the finish him prompt arises after a victory, a player might choose to stick it to the person they just defeated by hitting them with the strongest attack in the game, an uppercut. Well, if they do that at the pit, their opponent will be thrown from the platform and crash into deadly steel spikes, impaling them alongside the other poor souls who met their fate there too. And with this simple and brilliantly executed event, Midway opened up a mysterious door and asked the players to walk through it. The creators of Mortal Kombat left the tiniest of threads in the form of the pit fatality, knowing it would cause players to want to unravel the mystery. That is the true core of Mortal Kombat. The violence is the icing on the cake. It's the reward. The mystery is the real substance. When you left the arcade with your friends after playing Mortal Kombat, the discussion started with fatalities, but it quickly moved to, I wonder what else you can do. It's what piqued people's interest because it seemed as if there were endless possibilities, a notion that was entirely by design. Mortal Kombat was designed for you to believe there were always more secrets you had yet to unlock, some other great mystery if you could just pump a few more coins into the machine. Upon seeing the pit fatality, people would start to speculate, maybe even just to themselves, but the wheels would start turning. If you could finish your opponent in the pit, were there ways to do that in other arenas? Would Shang Tsung get up and kill your opponent in the throne room if you pushed the right sequence of buttons? Can each fighter perform their own special kill? They have their own special moves, I've seen them and done a few myself. There must be more. In cities all over the country, kids were piecing together the puzzle and comparing notes. At times, actual notes. And while the button sequence required to execute these fatalities wasn't exactly the most complex thing in the world, with 4 different directions, 5 buttons, and 3 different ranges at which these fatalities could occur, you could stumble upon a fatality, but it wasn't likely. I mean, do you think you could stumble upon someone's debit card PIN number? Because that's only a few buttons too, and you don't have to consider the specific distance you are from the machine. Over time though, the collective knowledge of players all over the country pieced these displays of violence together. The most popular kid at every school was the one who wrote down how to do all the fatalities and let you borrow the piece of paper he wrote it on during class so you could copy them down for yourself. Before long, it was common knowledge that every fighter had their own fatality, and you could likely see them frequently performed at arcades. One mystery was solved, but it only opened the door for others. Because of the secretive nature of the game's content, rumors of a second fatality for each fighter were rampant, along with all sorts of other crazy speculation. There was a way to play as the sub-boss Goro. I saw Kano eat the heart one time. There's some secret character named Ermac you could unlock. My buddy who works at the arcade said he saw it. You can have a fight in the spikes of the pit. There's a third ninja you can fight, and he's green and he has the moves of both of the other ninjas. His name's Reptile. I saw him once before a match. He gave me a clue about how to find him. So that last one is real. Reptile does exist, and he does randomly pop up before matches sometimes and give a clue as to how to find him. There's a good chance if you played Mortal Kombat at the arcade, you never saw Reptile even once. And if you did, you probably only saw him that one time, meaning you didn't have enough clues to know how to unlock a fight with him. One player may have seen blocking will get you nowhere, another might have seen look to La Luna, but there was no way one single person could piece it together without spending a fortune or all their time at the arcade. You had to talk to other people. All sorts of rumors swirled as to what the cryptic clues that the Green Ninja left meant. People started sharing their Reptile sightings with each other as if they'd seen some sort of arcade ghost. Solving the mystery of Reptile and defeating him was a bigger deal than beating the game, another feat that was not easily achieved without pumping stacks of quarters into the machine. Reptile was, in many ways, what Mortal Kombat was all about. He was the real prize. If you could figure out how to find him and then defeat him, you had solved the ultimate mystery. And mystery is the core of Mortal Kombat. Imagine stumbling upon a Reptile fight at the arcade and wondering how in the world that person got there and who this Green Ninja was. Because when you stepped up to the machine, Reptile was nowhere to be found. For your efforts, you were given 10 million points if you could defeat Reptile, a score that would surely boost you to the very top of the in-game leaderboard, something that actually used to mean something at arcades. Of course, you had to be in the Player 2 slot for some reason. Player 1 didn't get all the points due to a glitch, but that's besides the point. So, how do you solve the mystery of Reptile? Take a guess as to where he's hiding. In the pit. Yes, the pit plays the backdrop to the biggest mystery of all. If a single player sees a silhouette past the moon while fighting at the pit, by the way, that only happens every 40 matches, they must defeat their current opponent without blocking and score a double flawless victory with a fatality. Let me tell you right now, that is not an easy feat, especially in an arcade setting. If by some miracle the player does do that though, Reptile will challenge them to a fight at the bottom of the pit. As you can imagine, most kids never fought and certainly didn't beat Reptile, as he was also considerably more difficult than the other characters as well. But it didn't matter, every kid knew about Reptile, and everyone had a friend who swore they beat him. Sure you did, Jeff. Sure you did. All of this speculation, though, only added to the mystery and the legendary status of that boss fight. It really was the game's ultimate mystery. By the time Mortal Kombat had come out on the home consoles the next year, creating a whole new group of people trying to solve the many mysteries of the game, Mortal Kombat 2 had already hit the arcades months earlier. The developers at Midway saw that the many mysteries of the game drove tons of players to come back for more and more, so the second entry in the series brought the mystery to a completely new level. Each entry in the franchise would carry on this tradition, but the world of games and the world of information gathering was rapidly changing. Arcades were dying because of the home console market, and the internet created a space for people to accumulate the knowledge of players all around the world, solving nearly every aspect of the game's mysteries the day it was launched. With these changes, a de-emphasis in the series on mystery would begin. There were still secrets, but they were certainly not the focus for most players. The mystery that had made Mortal Kombat so great was dead. But for those who experienced it as it was happening, there was no game that brought people together quite like it. There was no game that captured the imagination like it did. There was no game that made you feel as if its best content was maybe still hidden. Mortal Kombat did mystery better than any game before it, and that is why we love it.